The rain fell harder now, drumming against the diner's neon sign with a kind of urgent rhythm. I watched from behind the counter as the girl lingered outside, her hoodie plastered to her thin frame. Her hands were pressed against the glass, like she was trying to will the warmth inside to reach her. That's when I realized she wasn't just cold. She was hungry. She asked for leftovers. One wordless gesture after the other, and my chest tightened. Something in her eyes held me. Not fear, not arrogance, but a quiet pride, a determination I hadn't seen in years. Most people begging for food had already given up on dignity. Not her. I slipped on my wet apron and opened the door. The warmth of the diner hit her first, followed by the smell of roasted garlic and simmering stew. She hesitated for a heartbeat at the threshold, her gaze sweeping the empty tables, the flickering light above. Then she looked at me, shy but steady. "Sit," I said, pointing to a corner booth. "Eat first. Then we'll see about the rest." She nodded, cautious, as if trusting me might be dangerous. I didn't ask her name yet. Some things are better earned, not demanded. I watched her unwrap the paper bag I handed her. The stew steam curled up toward her face, and she inhaled slowly, like she hadn't smelled food in days. She ate carefully, savoring each bite, not devouring it like someone starved for hours, but like someone learning to trust the world again. I cleaned a counter across from her, pretending to busy myself, but I couldn't stop my eyes from returning to her. Hunger and fear and resilience, they all mixed together in that small figure hunched over a paper bag. And I thought, maybe I've been lonely for so long, I forgot what it feels like to care this deeply about someone, even a stranger. When she finished, she looked up at me, hesitating. I can help," she said quietly. "I can clean, wash dishes, anything. I need a place to stay for tonight." Her words were simple, but the weight behind them hit harder than any Michelin star or applause I'd ever known. I had spent years hiding from the world, hiding from pain, from loss, from the memory of my daughter Lucy. But here was someone who needed help, someone who had nothing, yet carried herself with a dignity I envied. I nodded. "All right, you can stay, but you follow my rules." She blinked, relief washing over her features. Not triumph, not arrogance, just quiet, trembling relief. She reminded me of Lucy in ways I wasn't ready to admit yet, small, quiet gestures that carried more courage than most people display in a lifetime. That night, while she settled on the little cot behind the kitchen, I couldn't sleep. The diner was empty, but my mind was loud. Questions I didn't have answers for crowded my thoughts. Who was she really? Where did she come from? And why had fate brought her to my diner, to me, in this pouring rain on the loneliest night of the year? I didn't have answers, only a choice. And somehow, in that quiet, I knew I had already made it. The first spark of connection had been struck. Between a lonely chef and a homeless teen, the night was already beginning to change. I didn't know then that this night would set off a chain of events neither of us could have predicted. A chain that would test my heart, reveal truths I never wanted to see, and teach both of us what it really means to trust, to forgive, and to hope again. Days passed, and the diner felt a little less empty. Not because more customers were coming in, though a few curious late-night wanderers had started peeking through the windows, but because Maya was there. She had a quiet rhythm about her. She swept the floors with precision, stacked plates neatly, and even managed to chop vegetables without cutting herself once. It was small things like that that caught my attention. The way she moved, alert but careful, as if she didn't want to make a sound that might disturb the world. I watched her one evening, slicing onions, while humming a soft, tuneless song under her breath. I realized then how intelligent she was, how observant. She asked questions, little questions, about ingredients, techniques, even the history behind some of the dishes. Not because she wanted to impress me, but because she genuinely wanted to learn. And I noticed kindness. She had this way of noticing when a spilled cup or a stray towel bothered me more than it should have, and without saying anything, she would quietly fix it. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone else cared about the little details of my life. We fell into a rhythm together, careful, tentative. Sometimes, she'd linger by the counter and ask about me and my life, what had brought me to this quiet, forgotten diner. I would tell her bits, never the whole story, but enough for her to understand that I had known loss, that I had walked away from a life that had once been full of promise. Lucy. I hadn't spoken her name in years, but the way Maya listened, the way she tilted her head and waited, made me almost forget the weight of it all. Almost. And then, one evening, between wiping counters and stirring soup, she said something that made my chest tighten. "I've had nights where no one cares if I live or die," she whispered. Her eyes flickered down, ashamed, but I heard the raw honesty beneath it. "I've had no one. Just me." I froze mid-stir. That line, simple, almost casual, held more weight than anything she'd said before. I realized that for all my years of loneliness, I had been living in a cage of my own grief. And here she was, a girl barely 16, carrying a lifetime of hardship, yet still standing. I said nothing for a long time, just kept stirring. Words felt unnecessary. She was smart enough to know that. But inside, I felt something stir that I hadn't felt in a long time. Connection. Recognition. A fragile, budding trust that maybe, just maybe, we could help each other survive this lonely world. Maya never revealed much about her past. I respected that. There were hints. A sharp glance at a photograph she kept folded in her jacket. A slight flinch when a customer mentioned family dinners, but she refused to elaborate. And that was fine. Trust, I knew, couldn't be forced. It had to grow. And so we grew together in silence, in small gestures, in shared meals, in quiet laughter when a tray of soup tipped, spilling across the counter, in the late-night conversations about things that mattered most. Dreams, survival, and the faint hope that maybe tomorrow wouldn't be so cruel. Through her, I was reminded of something I'd nearly forgotten, that even after the deepest loss, even after isolation and regret, it was possible to feel warmth again, to bond over shared loneliness, to find a kind of family where none seemed possible. Little did I know, the connection we were building would soon be tested in ways neither of us could foresee, and that the shadows of her past and mine were quietly waiting, ready to step into the light. As the weeks passed, a quiet unease began to settle in the diner. Not the kind you notice from the hum of the refrigerator or the flicker of a neon sign, but the kind that grows when someone you care about starts carrying secrets you can't reach. Maya had fallen into a rhythm, helping with prep, sweeping floors, occasionally arranging the tables just so. But there were moments when she seemed elsewhere, distant, her thoughts far away from the warmth of the diner. Sometimes she would step outside in the middle of my work, her hood pulled low, whispering into her phone in a voice I couldn't hear. Other nights, she'd disappear altogether, claiming she was running an errand, though no errand I could imagine would take her into the storm at midnight. At first, I tried to ignore it. People have lives outside the diner, after all. But something about her behavior nagged at me. Not suspicion, not fear, exactly, but a quiet tension, like the air before a summer storm. She wasn't just a homeless teen looking for food and shelter. I could feel it in the way she watched me, the way she listened, the way she spoke carefully, always calculating her words. One evening, I found her sitting in the alley behind the diner, scribbling in a small notebook. She looked up at me and closed it quickly, her eyes wide. "Nothing," she said, a little too quickly. That was the moment I realized she was guarding something, maybe everything about herself. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront her fully. Not yet. There was something fragile about our connection, a bond built on trust so tentative that a single question might shatter it. And somewhere deep down, I knew the truth, whatever it was, would change everything. Still, I tried to focus on what I could see. The girl who laughed quietly when a tray tipped, the one who learned recipes faster than I could teach them, the one who reminded me, painfully, of a life I'd lost. But the unanswered questions lingered. Who was she really? Why had she come to my diner in the first place? And why did I feel, even now, that she was more than just a girl in need of shelter, that somehow, fate had brought her here for a reason I couldn't yet understand? Every time she returned from one of her mysterious disappearances, I studied her face for signs, a twitch of fear, a flash of guilt, a spark of something unspoken. And every time, I caught only glimpses, fragments of a story she wasn't ready to tell. I didn't know it then, but the threads were already being woven. Threads of a past I didn't know she carried. Threads that would eventually tie her to my own life in ways that would shock me to my core. And so I waited. For her to trust me enough to reveal herself. For the night when the truth would come out, unbidden, unavoidable. Until that night, though, all I had was the quiet tension, the small moments of laughter and kindness, and the uneasy certainty that the girl before me was hiding something far bigger than the streets she'd wandered. The audience, watching, would feel it too. The sense that this was no ordinary homeless teen, that this connection was only the beginning, and that the revelation waiting in the wings would change everything. It happened suddenly, without warning. One morning, I arrived at the diner to find it empty, eerily silent. The chairs were tucked in, the counters wiped clean, but there was no sign of Maya. No note, no bag, no footprints in the rain-slicked alley. It was as if she had vanished into the night itself. For a week I searched. I checked shelters, street corners, even the bus stations. I asked neighbors, made phone calls, left messages, nothing. Every hour that passed gnawed at me. A quiet, aching fear that I had misjudged her entirely, that she had slipped through my fingers like sand. Then a letter arrived, delivered to the diner's old mailbox. No return address, just a thick envelope, slightly worn, with my name written in careful, almost delicate handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, a strange premonition curling in my stomach. Inside was a single photograph and a note. The photo was old, faded, but unmistakable. A young woman held a baby in her arms, standing beside a man I recognized immediately. My heart stopped. The man in the photo, younger, hopeful, and alive, was me. And the baby was Maya. I stared at it for what felt like hours, the world narrowing to that single image. My hands shook as I unfolded the note. Elliot, I didn't know how to tell you. My mother never told me who my real father was. She said he left before I was born. But after seeing that photo of Lucy, I realized, you're my father. Maya. The room seemed to tilt. My mind spun with disbelief, then fear, then awe. Every memory of her cautious glances, her strange absences, her intelligence, her quiet pride, suddenly aligned in a terrifying, beautiful truth. The girl I had taken in, fed, and quietly cherished was not just a homeless teen in need of shelter. She was my daughter, my child, who had been kept from me all these years. Shock slammed into me, followed immediately by guilt. How had I not known? How had I failed her before I even met her? And yet, beneath that guilt, there was something else, a fragile, flickering hope that life was giving me a second chance, that fate had, in its strange, cruel way, corrected a wrong. I sat there for hours, holding the photo, staring at her face. There were tears I couldn't hold back, tears for the years lost, tears for the daughter I had never held, and yet somehow had found. Forgiveness for myself, for the past, for her mother, became suddenly necessary, because if I didn't forgive, I couldn't move forward. And forward was exactly what we needed. Maya had come into my life for a reason, not as a stranger, not as a passing shadow of hardship. She had come to me as my daughter, to remind me that even in loss, there's redemption, that even in grief, there's the chance to rebuild. And in that moment, the diner, the rain-soaked streets outside, the dim neon glow, all of it faded into insignificance. What mattered was her, and the extraordinary truth that she had carried with her quietly, patiently, until the time was right. I realized then that our story, our real story, was just beginning. Weeks passed after Maya returned, and life at the diner began to feel normal, in a quiet, fragile way. She worked alongside me, moving with confidence now, laughing quietly when something spilled, humming softly as she chopped vegetables. And yet, there was a spark in her I hadn't noticed before, a curiosity, a precision, a determination that went beyond survival. Then came the notice. A local youth cooking competition, a small regional contest, promising recognition and a modest cash prize. It wasn't the kind of stage I would normally encourage her to pursue, but something in her eyes told me she was ready. She entered. The day of the competition, I watched her from the sidelines, and then I saw it. Her dish, carefully plated, aroma filling the room, and in the judges' whispers, The name I hadn't heard in years, Crimson Bisque. My own recipe. The one I had lost years ago after the life that once was mine collapsed in grief and failure. I blinked, unable to comprehend it at first. How could she? The recipe had been locked away in the past, a memory I thought buried forever. And yet here it was, alive again, in her hands. Later, when I asked her, she looked at me quietly, without fear or guilt, and said, "My mother gave me your old journal," she admitted. She said I should know the man behind the recipes before I learned anything else about him. It hit me like a thunderclap. She hadn't come to the diner by accident. Every question she asked, every careful observation, every moment of silence, it had been a test. A test of character, of patience, of integrity. She had come to see whether the man behind the food, the lonely chef, the broken father, the man I thought I had become, was worthy of the daughter she had only just discovered. I felt amazement, and something else I hadn't felt in years, humility. Here was my child, my own blood, stepping into a world I had once ruled with accolades and fame, not to impress or challenge me, but to understand me, to feel whether the man I had become could be trusted with her heart. And there it was, the truth laid bare. Talent, kindness, redemption, passed through generations in ways I could never have imagined. She hadn't just inherited my recipes. She had inherited my chance at second chances, my opportunity to be the father I had failed to be before. In that moment, watching her present the dish with quiet pride, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the people we think we're saving are the ones who end up saving us. And sometimes, the family we never knew we had is the one that teaches us what it means to forgive, to trust, and to love again. The audience, if they could see it, would feel the awe, the intrigue, the deep satisfaction of a secret long hidden finally revealing itself. A girl who seemed like a stranger, a teen scraping by on the streets, had become a mirror for the man I thought I had lost, and in doing so, had given us both the gift of a new beginning. The day Maya returned to the diner for good was quiet but unforgettable. I remember the moment clearly. She walked in, carrying her small bag, eyes bright with determination and something softer, warmer, a trust that had taken weeks, months, to grow. I didn't say anything at first. I just opened my arms, and she ran into them. The embrace was long and unbroken. In that moment, I didn't just feel relief. I felt the weight of years lift off my shoulders. She was my daughter. The daughter I had never held, never known, had come to me, whole and alive, and in her presence, the hollow emptiness I had carried for so long began to fade. Together, we began to rebuild not just our relationship, but the diner itself. No longer a place merely for food and fleeting conversations. It became something more. We turned it into a community kitchen. We served homeless teens, children who wandered the streets like Maya once had, teaching them cooking, patience, and dignity. The little ones watched her with awe as she moved confidently around the kitchen, guiding them gently, just as I had guided her. Every bowl of soup, every loaf of bread, every small lesson was a reminder of how acts of kindness, even small, quiet acts, can transform lives. I had learned it the hard way, and now I was living it alongside her. We shared laughter, tears, and sometimes silence that felt more meaningful than any conversation. Loneliness, we discovered, could be a bridge to connection if only we dared to open our hearts. Yet, even as the diner thrived, there were still mysteries. Maya's early years, the truths her mother had kept hidden, the story of how she survived before coming to me. Pieces of the puzzle that would never be fully revealed. Sometimes I would catch her staring at an old photograph, or pausing mid-step, as though remembering something I was never meant to know. And sometimes I wondered if these secrets were a part of her strength, the same quiet resilience that had first drawn me to her. Life had given me a second chance, not just with my daughter, but with the purpose I had thought I had lost. And though some questions remained unanswered, some shadows never fully illuminated, the warmth of the diner, the laughter of children learning to cook, and the quiet presence of Maya by my side were proof enough that even amidst loss and mystery, life could be beautiful. In the end, the story wasn't just about a homeless teen or a lonely chef. It was about redemption, about the courage to trust, and about the extraordinary power of love and kindness to heal wounds that seemed impossible to mend. And in that quiet, rain-kissed diner in Ohio, amidst the clatter of dishes and the aroma of fresh bread, I finally understood what it meant to be a father, not just in name, but in heart, in action, and in soul.